I'm so happy just to be able to be here with you today and share our story from Six Nations. And so the Creator allowed me to be here to get better and have a voice to come and speak with you, so I'm delighted. I'd like to, first of all, start before my presentation and say a few words about the previous speakers today. I'm going to be reading my binder because I know that some of the information is invaluable. We all have to learn about water. It is sacred, and we need to become a lot more technical in looking at how we can, what we can do to make a difference in safe drinking water. And I want to thank our elder this morning who gave us a good message, and that was letting others take care of water and our issues hasn't worked. And it has not worked. And I think that he reminded us that we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We all have to stand up and look at the issue and look at how we can move forward in a positive way. I know there was another gentleman who mentioned working with government officials. Well, the reality is we are in a political environment. Our communities are dominated with politics and through the Indian Act. And we haven't a choice. We have to work together with government officials. And our challenge is and will continue to be, how are we going to do that and yet protect and take care of our people in a way that is our own way? And I think that is a challenge that all First Nations, all Aboriginal people, all Indigenous peoples around the whole world have had to deal with. And we will continue to have to deal with that. And I think one of the solutions is our youth, our children, educating them young. And as we become more educated, they can tackle the problem in a scientific, spiritual, and cultural way. And that is, as an educator, my PhD, Doctor of Philosophy and Education. So I'm an educator, so it's really important for me to talk about the youth and our children and help them get involved in this issue. Tom, the previous speaker, his message came from a broader context. His platform was on an Indigenous world water issues at the International World Forum. You know, sometimes at the community level, that's huge, like that's like from Mars, because you know we get so focused at the community level on our day-to-day issues that it's really, really wonderful to know that we have people out there fighting on that level, the battle for us, and doing such a tremendous job. So his message did my heart good. And then we have people like Hans and Sue and the Safe Drinking Water Foundation who are leading on the leading edge with the expertise on water, and the many volunteers, the scientists who are working in the foundation to bring the message forward and to help us understand water treatment, sanitation, and all of the issues, because we really need that knowledge, and we have to learn about it. And I think that with them now, you know, working with us across the country at local community levels, it's important. And then at the community level, which is where I'm at now, it's where the heart of where we are. It's our existence. We have to live with the solutions and the problems and the challenges every day of our lives, and we care about it for our next 7 generations. We all know that as First Nations peoples. And I think that we get focused and we get bogged down in our day-to-day struggle and challenges. So it's nice to know from previous speakers that there is strength, and there is always strength in numbers and strength in expertise. And I'm grateful and thankful for all of these peoples who are working for all of us. And I'd like to call them that these are our water warriors doing this work with us, taking action in a positive way. So I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm pleased to share our story with you, hoping that you might, if you're experiencing some of the problems that we're experiencing at Six Nations, that indeed some of the things that we're doing. You can reach out and get some help. So with that, I will move on into my presentation now. I am really technically illiterate, so I've got to make sure I'm doing this right. Do I just, there we go. I got it now. It's just a little round button, right? All right. I'm going to talk about our issue in 3 parts. Okay, thank you. I should have gotten this training session a few minutes earlier, but now I've got it. I'm a quick learner. Part 1, we're going to talk about Six Nations, who we are. Part 2, we're going to look at the world we live in and our external relationships, because we are in a context that's bigger than us. And I know this morning we heard about that world context, which is really nice, because now we're going to go from the world to the national, from the national to the community level, and how we have to interrelate with government officials. And our own, our other nations across Canada. Part 3 is going to be about our well water crisis. Who are we? Well, at Six Nations, we're really unique. We have, it's one of the only First Nations in Canada with 6 different nations. We are Mohawk, we are Cayuga, Tuscarora, Oneida, Onondaga, and Seneca, with the majority being Mohawk. We're Iroquois and Haudenosaunee peoples, and a lot of our brothers and sisters live in New York State and in different parts of southern Ontario. So when we talk about our confederacy, we're talking about, and our Haudenosaunee ways, we're talking about all those other communities also, not just Six Nations. Six Nations population as of January 2004, we are the largest populated First Nation in Canada. We know there are approximately 633 First Nations communities, and we have a total population of 21,874 people. Living inside our community, we have 11,157, 51%, and then outside our community, 49%. So we're a large community. Oh dear.
Use that roller and go back.
I am sorry. Six Nations land base. In 1784, we have a Haldeman proclamation. It's a treaty for our land, and it was donated by the Crown. And we had 950,000 acres. Today we have 46,500 acres. And of that, I want to show you, we were in the Haldeman deed, we were granted 6 miles along the Grand River from the mouth to the source. And if you look at this slide, from the mouth to the source is from here all the way up to here. Can you see? No, you're not seeing that. Well, from the bottom to the top. I should have practiced. And there's no way, I'm not tall enough. Okay, so from that whole gray area was the 950,000 acres, the tract of land. And what we have left is that little orange spot in the middle, but the Grand River flows from the mouth, Lake Erie, all the way up. So we had a lot of land, and we're in court now. We have a court claim against the federal government. We're asking for an accounting of what's happened to all that land, because we had a trustees taking care of it for us. And so we've lost it. So this is, again, one of our huge political struggles that's an ongoing concern to us. So I just wanted to give you context of our territory. We just had some new signs up. We're pretty proud of them through our tourism project. So this welcomes you to our community and of Six Nations. And this is the 46,500 acres. This is what it looks like. And as you see at the top of the map, the blue is the Grand River. And that's the main source of water for our treatment plant, water treatment plant. And we have a number of rivers that go through the community in various places, and I will show you that. The pink on the, let's see, left, on the right-hand side, right-hand corner is New Credit. And they are not part of us. They have their own reserve community. This is the Grand River, and that little boat, they have tours along the Grand River. It's very wide, it's long, it's very deep. So our water and sewer statistics. The, is this right? Yeah. We have a total of 2,600 homes in our community. And of these, 375 have piped water. They're the only ones that are hooked up to our water treatment plant. We have 1,449 homes that have individual wells, and that's approximately 7,500 people. So the majority of our people are on a well system. We have 559 homes with trucked water, and 312 homes with no water supply at all. We're trying to figure this out and finding out what's happening in that. We've just become aware of this, and we're trying to see what they do. So isn't that amazing today, in this century, that we have people that have no water in their homes at all, no water supply? We have 301 homes connected to our sewer system, over 2,000 homes with individual septic systems, and 312 homes with no service. With our existing conditions with respect to our infrastructure, we have a water treatment plant, and it's functioning well beyond capacity. And I know that I wanted to give you some information on that. And so I talked to our director, our water treatment plant was rated for a maximum day capacity of 16.2 liters per second, or 1,400 cubic meters per day. And the plant runs 24 hours a day, and so it only produces 9.7 liters per second over 24 hours, or 60% of its original capacity, because it's just functioning over capacity. So we have a capital plan that is scheduled for expansion or upgrading or a new plant in the next 2 years, and we've been working with federal officials on that. And it's been under study for 2 years to get that far in the capital plan. You have to have everything in a capital plan according to the federal government to be able to move forward. So we are scheduled, we are working on it. We have built into that new capital plan a 2% growth. However, it's only going to accommodate several more homes, and not huge numbers when we have, several hundreds and a couple of thousand people to be concerned about, and our population is growing every year. We have close to 200-300 babies every year in our community, so we are growing, and we will probably continue to grow. The cost for the new water plant only has been estimated to be $12 million, and we have elevated water storage tank, and that is at the southwest edge of our village, and the total storage volume is 1,136 cubic meters with a maximum water level of 45.5 meters. The disinfection is by means of ultraviolet light and chlorine in the form of sodium and hypochlorite. I'm learning these terms. And it's dosed at 2 locations, one at the plant and one downstream of the filter. It is not adequate at this moment in time. It needs to be expanded significantly, and we're working on that also. That's part of our capital plan. There are 22,500 meters of water main. With respect to our water quality, Six Nations officials monitor the system daily at different locations at the distribution plant. We've had a study done as of July 2004 by Mac Vero and about our water distribution system. And we've found that turbidity is not an issue, that the, THMs, trihalomethanes, that are formed through chlorine and organic materials are a problem in the distribution system. We have high color values in treated water, and we have high sodium levels, and that sodium isn't being removed through the filtration system. And so there are some problems with even our water treatment plant, although it is safe to drink. But we're addressing those in a large community plan, and we are working with government officials on that. This is our water treatment plant, picture of it. This is the inside of it. And with respect to the existing infrastructure for water and housing developed and approved by federal officials, that's a really important point, because I know that at this moment in time, as we look for solutions, federal officials are quick to remind us, with respect to well water, that what are the well owners, what is their contribution? How much are they going to be expected to pay? And my response is, well, let's look at how widespread the problem is, and with the existing infrastructure for water, they were approved by your officials. So if it has something to do with well construction and you approve them, then perhaps there's some responsibility to provide some funding to assist with that. We won't know that until the end of November, exactly what the causes are, but that study is well underway. Only 14% of the homes are on the central water system, and 86% cannot access central water service. So again, we're treated as mainly a rural community because we're on individual well water systems. The sanitary sewage, we have 7 pumping stations, 2,500 sanitary sewer lines, 3 cell sewage lagoon, and we need to augment and replace aged sewers. We are working on this again in our capital plan. So our people are working very hard to ensure that we are moving forward, but it's at a turtle's pace. This is a picture of our existing water main. So you'll see it's just through the main portion of the community that the square in the center is Ashwaubenon, which is our village. And you'll see that our village is mainly, it's all along 4th Line and Chiefswood Road towards the Grand River. But we have much larger with no service. And this is the picture of our sewer lines. And it's mainly, again, if you looked at it in a bigger context, along the 4th Line and Chiefswood Road. I want to talk about existing structures that we exist in with this top-down approach and the communication gaps. All First Nations are experiencing these kinds of issues. I know this because I have worked at the national level with the Assembly of First Nations for 5 years as the Director of Education. And so I'm very familiar with issues from a national perspective. And in addition to that, I worked for the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations as their national liaison for a year when Chief Perry Bellegarde headed up the Federation. So having had that experience has been extremely valuable because it allows me to understand what's happening at the national level and how it impacts at the local community level. And now that I'm back at home in my community, this knowledge has really helped me work with federal officials to know that, gee, sometimes if you're keeping me at the regional level and local level and I don't want to be there, there are ways around it. And sometimes you have to go around government officials to a higher level to ensure that you are getting the proper attention, the appropriate action. So When we talk about the national, regional, and local levels, we have to deal with not just the federal government, but First Nations also. And I think we forget that in our looking for solutions, that it's not just the federal government, because there are First Nations organizations also that we all are aware of, if we're First Nations. We have, at the national level, in First Nations milieu, the Assembly of First Nations with the national chief, and it's a body for chiefs. It's a lobby and advocacy organization. And at regional levels, usually the AFN, the Assembly of First Nations, has regional vice chiefs in each of those areas. There are also regional organizations. For example, in Saskatchewan, they're very organized with the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations. There's a chief from every community in Saskatchewan. I think there are about 72 nations. And in Ontario, we have the Chiefs of Ontario, COO. And there are some others. There's AIAI, Allied Indians Association. So we have several organizations in Ontario, but we still work through those bodies. At the local level, as I indicated, according to Assembly of First Nations, there are 633 communities across Canada, and they are headed up by chief and councils. And so in our community, we have Chief Roberta Jameson, and as a matter of fact, she wanted to be here, but she asked me to send her greetings. She is working very hard on behalf of our nation, meeting with ministers and looking for solutions, and it's a constant job. You have to be out there all of the time soliciting support, and she does that extremely well. And so we have 12 councillors that sit on our council. Our council sits every 3 years, and that's the other issue. We're heading into an election this year, and it's in November, so the minute politicians are up for election, it gets a little different. So the community, that's what we're preparing to do now, and we're bringing closure to many of our priorities, although the water crisis has become #1 priority in our community. At the federal levels, we have the Prime Minister, we have the Minister of the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs, or DIAND, or INAC. And then we have also the federal officials that we have to deal with, the deputy ministers and the associate deputy ministers, ADMs. And at the regional level, we have regional offices with the regional director generals, and the regional director generals have a lot of authority. They report directly to the deputy minister. So they have a lot of control within the department at the regional level. And then we have federal officials who usually work with our communities, unless, of course, we have district offices and federal officials at the district level, too, that deal with communities. So these are the levels that First Nations peoples have to deal with. And so there are multiple layers. It's not as easy as you might think. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, just because finding solutions has to involve many of these people sometimes. And I wanted to ensure that everybody was aware of that. So what are some of the federal government system, with their system, the built-in restrictions and barriers that we face as First Nations peoples? Well, we've said this over and over again. One size does not fit all. It negates the diversity of our nations and the appropriate focus on our local needs. You know, whenever you look for a solution that for solutions that are one-sized, and there's not one answer. I mean, even within our community, even with the well systems within our community, there may be several different solutions depending on where in the community you're situated and you have water problems. So to think that every community is going to have the same solution, it just doesn't make sense. It's nonsense. So in addition to that, there's this top-down policy with little to no input from the community level. Sometimes our regional bodies and our national bodies are the ones that the federal government wants to speak to, and they forget us. and we don't have a voice. And so we have to be vigilant, we have to stand up, and we have to make sure that our voice is heard. What helps Six Nations is that we're so large, and being large with lots of people makes a difference. It gives us strength, but sometimes within the community we have some issues also, and I think that's true of every First Nation. Regional officials work with communities, and it's difficult sometimes to interact at the national level. They try to keep the problems contained at the regional level. We experienced this with the water crisis and with many of our issues. They don't want us going to Ottawa without them being in the loop. There's a lack of appropriate and realistic funding. I think everybody knows that. And so it's usually based on availability. There's one pot, and it's not based on our needs and our requirements. I know when Chief Jameson became chief, she made it very clear that we were required within all of our administration departments to make sure that we were basing our funding request on need, whether it was in alignment with what federal government said or not. And just to give you context, I head up the administration. We have close to 600 employees, and we have a senior management team of approximately 22 officials. So we're pretty big, and we provide all of the programs and services within our community, and they are growing. So changing the mindset sometimes of just giving Diane what they were going to give us, allowing us to have what was available. So we've been building cases and using numbers and statistics to argue our cases in all the different program areas. So we're trying very hard to not base it on what they're willing to give us, but what we need. The government officials slow down processes to match availability of funding. Capital planning takes excessive amount of time to action. And I think it's true. If it's not in your plan and you haven't included it, there's no room for it. And so sometimes, in reality, things change significantly from year to year, and it's not built into this capital plan. So we're trying to constantly update it and change it, and that gets challenging, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. And there is this, Tom spoke to this legacy of colonial attitude. It's real, it's alive, and we've dealt with it our whole lives. If you're from a community, you know about it. And I know we've had to struggle with officials knowing what is best for us and telling us what we can do and should do, and insisting on the type of action to take. There's a reluctance to accept findings of any studies that we do on our own at the community level, and they question results and are reluctant to accept our credentials and our knowledge at local levels. I'm continually reminding people that, you know, we get our credentials at the same place that everybody else does, and we've earned them. And if we're giving you information with all of the data, we need to know the answers too. So please believe what we're saying. You can check our results, but we have to live with the end results. And so it's been a challenge. And you'll see that as we go through the information. But these are the things that we've experienced at Six Nations. And in addition to that, we find that the government operates within limited parameters, which narrows the approach that government officials can take. And sometimes it's not the fault of the federal officials, because they have to do things a certain way. That's their job. And so it's a systemic barrier then. And with Health Canada officials, we found that they would only focus on individual wells and individual solutions. And so you couldn't get an understanding of the scope of the problem, because that's not how they looked at the problem. So there's these blinders, and that lack of knowledge then keeps us at a certain level instead of helping us understand the whole picture. So I have a question, and the question is, how knowledgeable and how current are federal officials in technology requiring water solutions? I'm not sure about that. So it's something that we have to be mindful of. And I think there's also a lack of appropriate standards and guidelines for well water in communities applying provincial standards. And so that's the other area that we have to be insistent and really important to look at. So these are some of the broader restrictions that we're working within our community. I don't know if that's the case in your community, but it sure is in mine. Anybody? I mean, are any of these ideas new? Can I show of hands from community? Are you experiencing some of the same things in your communities? Can you show me? Anybody? Yes? Yes, I see some reluctant hands. I know sometimes it's hard to stand up and be willing to say it, but it is true. And I think that it doesn't mean that it means that we have to find a way through this. And we have to work with federal government officials, and we're trying to do that in a positive way. We are at the table with them all the time. We are working with them on a technical water committee. And some days they do really good work, and we try to bring them along with us, and we're trying to bring our community members along with us too. Setting the scene, some of the headlines, I brought some articles of the paper with respect to our water crisis and some of the things that were being said. I'm not going to read them all, just some of them, but here we had Chief Jameson saying on March 31st, "This is serious. We are a Walkerton in the making, and we demand immediate action from the federal government. I don't think that we need to wait for an actual tragedy or a loss of life in this community to pay attention to the problem," she told the Canadian press. Jameson said the Six Nations Council informed the Department of Indian Affairs about the problem after it received test results March 22nd, but was told no one from the department would be able to attend the town meeting. And she says, "It's obvious to me they do not appreciate the urgency of this situation." She did acknowledge that the department has been working on long-term strategy to solve water problems on the reserve, but she said this study and the results demanded immediate action. Our groundwater is clearly and severely contaminated across the entire reserve. So she escalated, this was escalated by our chief and counsel to the national level. So she says, it's pretty clear in article number 3, she says, "What kind of help has the federal government offered?" was the question, and she says, "It's pretty clear to us that the officials who came to the meeting were not giving a mandate to deal seriously with the water contamination at Six Nations." And our officials were told yesterday that the minister would be calling to discuss this issue with us, and she says, "I have no reason to believe the minister won't respond fully to a crisis of this nature, but I will be impressing upon him the fact that we have to move forward, and our community is going to move forward. We can't afford to sit back and allow our people's safety and health to be at risk." And so she was adamant, and so was our chief and counsel, that we were going to move forward. In some of the other documents, she said, no matter how much the federal government commits, her council is determined to fix the problem. People shouldn't be worried about taking a bath. They should be able to go to sleep at night not worrying about the health of their children. There is no price tag on the health and safety of our residents. Diane officials did say that the department's initial contribution is a beginning and vowed to continue working with our leaders. But our chief felt that this was just a drop in the bucket, and they offered to cover $190,000 for the study that we had conducted without their approval, and that showed the results. And then we had, they offered another $150,000 to begin to address the problem. And we'll go into that in a minute. But I also want to speak to, we went to the number 5, which would have been, no, I'm going to go to number 6, April 2, from Chiefs of Ontario, the statement from Charles Fox. I want to talk about, because it's important when a local chief makes a statement, then of course media is going to go to the chiefs of Ontario, then they're going to go to the national chief and say, well, what do you think, what do you think, what do you think? And in fact, that's what happened. And this article on April 2nd from Chiefs of Ontario, we had the Vice Chief Charles Fox saying that he fully backs the Six Nations of the Grand River and its demand for Canadian government action to remedy a situation which has left thousands of residents with heavily contaminated drinking water. But he also said Six Nations is just one of over 2 dozen First Nations communities in Ontario whose water systems place the lives of their people in daily jeopardy. The federal government has legal responsibilities to deal with this accumulation of unmet needs that has built up over the decades of neglect. He also says, our treaties provided Canada with lucrative resources which have been the foundation for Canada's prosperity. It is totally immoral that Canada is not willing to use a share of its income to provide good drinking water, a basic human right. And indeed, the national chief on April 3rd in the Hamilton Spectator said something of a similar nature. He said the recent report of dangerous, and this is National Chief Phil Fontaine, the recent report of dangerous levels of E. coli bacteria in the well water of many homes in Six Nations is unacceptable in a first world country. Unfortunately, the situation comes as no great surprise to First Nations peoples. First Nations communities across Canada have been living with unsafe drinking water for decades. The 2003 federal budget set aside $600 million to be spent over 5 years for upgrading First Nations water systems. We feel this response is simply not consistent with the urgency of the demand. Approximately 1/4 of more than 630 First Nations across Canada are at high risk. According to May 2003 Health Canada stats, 28 First Nations communities in Ontario alone were under boil water orders. British Columbia had the highest number at 39 communities. So the final media article was one that April 2nd, work is underway from, we had a message from Minister Mitchell from DIAMD, Department of Indian Affairs, saying that work would be underway to address the urgent problem of improving water quality on the reserve at Six Nations. And Minister Mitchell promised to appoint a special minister's rep to oversee the development of a remedial action plan that would ensure safe drinking water and water for household use is provided to community residents. And indeed, that has happened. So using the media sometimes to your advantage, as long as you have the statistics, and is helpful. And indeed, that's what got us urgent action at the upper levels. So the background, the well water, the approach used from 1970s to 2004 in our community was continuous water monitoring program for wells, but the results went only to the individual home owners or well owners, and these followed the Health Canada guidelines. And samples were sent to a public health lab for bacteriological testing, and this was operated by Health Canada and our own Six Nations community health rep. Results were never sent anywhere but to the individual homeowners, so it's an isolated problem at an individual level. In 1995, Health Canada did a Green Plan drinking water supplies testing program, and they looked at 63 private wells and public water supplies. And at the end of that program, I just want to say at the end of that program, this is what they said. This was from the letter to the community. The conclusion drawn by Health Canada was that most of the water at Six Nations of the Grand River does not pose health concerns, rather the problems are aesthetic. So that's how they perceived the water problem at that time. We became alerted to the problem in July 2003. We had hired a consultant through the competitive process to look at the evaluation of a water utility company at Six Nations. And when they looked at some of the results from the Green Plan, they were highly concerned. And so they recommended that the well water be examined, that it was a problem. And so when they made this presentation to our chief and council, our chief and council passed a band council resolution, and they indicated that we had to develop an action plan to look at the wells, to test them, to develop a long-term plan to access water, and arrange a meeting with Diand officials. And then in response to that, of course, in August, the chief and council established the Technical Water Committee, and that was across our departments, and I was to head it up. We have Public Works, the Environment, Health, Community Planning, and we work with some outside consultants who had the expertise that we needed. And as a matter of fact, our community planner, Nasir, is here today with us, and one of the consultants working on our project, Jeff Fraser, is also with us from the community. On August 2003, we joined the Safe Drinking Water Foundation. We were looking to find some outside expertise to validate some of the concerns, and Hans and I have been on the telephone sending emails. He's been an incredible help to me and to our community. And we joined the Safe Drinking Water Foundation because we thought it was a good thing to do, to have some outside expertise, and they seem to be on the leading edge and working with our communities, and this has just been a wonderful thing for them to do, and for us also. So it's to our advantage, and so it's been only a positive relationship thus far. On September 8, 2003, our chief and council passed another band council resolution approving our action plan because we got together and did what they asked us to do and began the research in testing water, and had a plan put together and brought to council. And then they approved the consultant that we hired to engage on the initial study. And then in September 2003, Six Nations Council had met with the Regional Director General from Indian Affairs. And at that time, Council gave the Technical Water Committee that was local direction to work with federal officials. And then what happened is we ended up developing, they wanted a comprehensive community plan to address issues regarding the water plant, well water testing, sewer relining sewage, and to look at the broader context. Now I understand that, but we were afraid that if we did that, we were going to be slowed down. And in fact, that was the truth. That's exactly what happened. And so in January 2004, Council met with the Regional Director General of Diand and requested assurance of funding for the work that we were already undertaking in the well water testing. And they assured us that yes, they would assist. February, Six Nations Council met with Minister Mitchell in our community, and we highlighted the urgent community requirements and the need to work in a new way to get the job done, because at this time we still hadn't been able to complete a terms of reference for this comprehensive community plan. And so we were being bogged down and not being able to address the real issue, but our study was going on anyway. And so between October and March, we had 4 meetings with the federal government officials and in the development of the terms of reference for this comprehensive community plan that was going to help address our water issues. But after 6 months, the terms of reference were still in progress, and today they still are in progress. So we moved ahead, and so we received feedback from Diand on terms of reference, and they thought there was concern about the approach that we wanted to take, and they didn't want to complete any action before the community plan was approved. So there's just these holdups all of the time. It's a constant frustration sometimes that we have to undergo. So on the sideline, we're still doing our study, right? We had to have some results because they would not have listened to us without those results. If we did not have those statistics, we would not have been able to bring media attention. We would have not been able to move forward more quickly. And so the study, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We had a consultant looking at our well waters, testing them over 7 months. The preliminary results presented to Six Nations technical water reps in March, March 22, we had a draft final report that we presented to council. And at that time, our council passed a resolution accepting the study and the implementation of the recommendations. And they approved a phased approach within the terms of reference and wanted immediate action on the water crisis. And that was to conduct a hydrogeological study, an alternative study, and to examine the relationship of the health conditions of Six Nations people and the quality of water at Six Nations. And we were supposed to examine the work of this SHARE-UP program because they're already working on health conditions, heart conditions, and to look at their water to see if there is a connection. We don't know if there's a connection. I don't think we've had the time to look at that, but we want to investigate that further. It's really important work. Some of the findings in the groundwater study, the results were alarming. Potentially life-threatening situation exists at Six Nations. The problem is widespread across the entire reserve in all types of wells. 82% of the wells had total coliform counts greater than 5, and this greatly exceeded the Ministry of Health guidelines. And 27% of the wells had E. coli counts greater than 0. And there is no acceptable amount in drinking water or water used within a household for purposes other than drinking. So this was quite shocking. This is a picture of the total coliforms. I really have problems with that, greater than a count of 5. And the yellow dots, if you can see them, are the dug or bored wells, and the red ones are drilled wells. So you can see that, you can see that it's widespread throughout the community. It's everywhere. We thought it might be clustered in one area close to the gypsum plant, or somewhere. That would be explainable. But when it was everywhere, we were quite surprised and shocked to find this result. But there it was. And in addition to that, you'll see that, again, this is the E. coli greater than 0, and the yellow, again, is the dug or bored wells, and the red is drilled wells. And so you can see that, again, it's everywhere. It's not in one small cluster. So this was quite interesting and surprising to us. And this is the first time this study of this nature had been done in our community. Again, I remind you that Health Canada and our officials kept the well testing results at the individual well homeowner level. And so we never had a full picture. So this is the first time, and we went forward with this study because we wanted to say, yeah, we have a problem. And so now it became clear that we really did have a problem, and it was a crisis because there were unacceptable levels of turbidity, hardness, sodium levels, and these present health problems for those with heart disease, kidney disease, or hypertension. And if you look at our stats, cardiovascular disease at Six Nations is 2 to 3 times greater than the national rate, and high blood pressure is 7% higher than the national average. And so we were very concerned. And the volatiles, the coliform, and I'm not going to say that the next words, but anyway, those volatiles can lead to liver and kidney damage and dizziness. And so these are left over from the chlorine treatment in the water. So this is the residue from all the chlorine treatment, because Health Canada kept telling people, put chlorine in your water to get rid of the contamination. And as we kept doing so, then we created a new problem. And so that leads to additional health issues. So we haven't been able to connect those health issues, but we're going to be looking at them. So political action. This is important because your chief and council have to be on board. And so in this time frame, we've been very fortunate to have Chief Roberta Jameson as our chief, because she's well known nationally, and she garners a lot of attention, and she lobbies and advocates on our behalf extremely well. And she does so in a very good way, and it's made a huge difference. We brought legitimacy to the issue. So letters were sent to ministers, mayors, members of parliament, letters from Diane. Oh, the letter we received said we should we should put a boil water advisory in. Well, we've had a boil water advisory since 2000. So, you know, I don't know how seriously they took that the problem, but we've had that boil water advisory in effect since that time. So we kept reminding our people, because people become complacent after a while. If you're not resolving the problem and helping fix it, then people think it is not serious when it is. So we shared the meeting results, the report results in our community at the end of March. And in April, the action taken, we met with our technical water committee with the media present. It was claimed a water crisis. I read you all of those articles. And at that time, the same day after our meeting with the press and the water committee with government officials, Six Nations Council passed a band council resolution endorsing emergency action. And we were involving the media, shifting the focus to the national level, contacting other First Nations, and implementing a local action plan. And in fact, that's what we did. We have elevated the water crisis to the national level. We now have a minister. Minister Mitchell did agree to appoint a special minister. And we also had council pass a band council resolution to separate the water crisis from the immediate from that community plan. And so we're now working with them separately to expedite the matters. And we have Honorable Doug Frith as the Minister's Special Representative. He's met with Council and agreed to move forward on 2 studies, and that's the hydrogeological study and alternative study. Within the community, when we found out we had the crisis, we sent out community flyers, we had radio announcements, we called, people had a call-in number to answer questions, and we're encouraging people to test their wells because they don't know what's in them, and so you shouldn't be drinking the water. And so additional assistance was provided by Health Canada. We are providing access to safe water from our water treatment plant and to shower facilities. We have a number of facilities in our community that we have 5 schools, elementary schools in our community that have showers. We have a J. Silver Hills complex, which is a home for disabled peoples and people with issues. We have a senior citizen home in our community. We have a birthing center. So we have access to shower facilities if people need them. Our health services received from March to July for first calls for water testing, 642 calls, and second calls for water testing, 91, and 99 calls for health inspections, and 69 calls for water results. And so we had over 1,000 calls since that time, and we're trying very hard with our staff to bring attention and work with our community members to find solutions immediately. So of those first calls for testing, we found that similar results with total coliform counts greater than 5 and E. coli counts greater than 0, 76%, 17%, and then with second calls, 87% total coliform counts greater than 5 and 32% with E. coli counts greater than 0. So, and I have to tell you, we have some of the hydrogeological study results, and it's verified the results of the first study. We have a very huge problem. And so now we'll know, probably by the end of November, we'll have the preliminary results of the hydrogeological study looking for causes, and we'll know exactly what's happening where, and then we'll be looking at the same time at some solutions. And so we're in that process now, and I think that next steps, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to continue to work collaboratively with the Minister's Special Rep and government officials to move forward in a timely and cost-effective manner. We're going to try to access adequate funding to implement the study recommendations. And within the community, we're ensuring our well owners have access to safe water. We continue to do that. So our parting message for all First Nations communities is this. I think you require strong political leadership with the Chief and Council taking a firm stand to direct action. Your political body must get involved. And I think you also require strong leadership within your administration to implement the direction of the Chief and Council. Because we're the ones who have to find solutions and work with the officials on a regular, ongoing basis. So we're the ones that gather the facts and work assertively with them, and it is really time-consuming. It takes a lot of your time and a lot of your energy. However, now that we've all acknowledged that we have an issue, there's more willingness to move forward. However, there's still reluctance for solutions, giving money for solutions. The homeowners are still, well owners are still going to figure into this factor. So we have that battle yet to fight. And we will engage in that as we move forward. But I think it's important to gather your information and tell your story to the media if you have one. That's important. If you have real well water or any water issues. And I think you have to work to establish a local team of officials to work together to coordinate and implement action. It's been really beneficial working with our local water team and some outside consultants, because a team is stronger, and sometimes even inside, you work our officials have worked many long years with federal government officials, and sometimes they don't believe that the officials are wrong. And I don't think the officials intend to be wrong, it's just that people are fallible. And I think that if you wear blinders and look at the problem only one way, then you can't see outside the box. So we're learning to do that better. And it's not easy. It's never easy, but it's the way of life for us. And so, you just hang in there, and you stand up and you do the best you can. You have to work politely, and you use the tools and you use statistics, and we have found that has worked for us. And we've all stood strong, and it's making a difference. And it has made a difference. And it's also important, we heard earlier, and from all speakers, to network and engage the help of others. Consultants who represent the interest of your community, other First Nations who have similar problems. We know a lot of First Nations are having similar problems. The National Chief has said so. Within Ontario, the Chief of Ontario said so. So other First Nations who have similar problems, you have to start networking. And it's easier now that we have the computer. We have to solicit the support of regional and national First Nations organizations, and I recommend we join the Safe Drinking Water Foundation. I have found them to be leading in the expertise in some of these areas. They have been selfless, and they work tirelessly, and they have provided really solid, good advice. When I wasn't sure of how to move forward, I'd call Hans and say, Hans, what do you think? Am I on the right track? Could you explain what this means to me? I am neophyte when it comes to water. I'm an educator, so water issues, a whole new area to learn about. But I have begun to learn because I need to know and need to understand the issues. And so I've taken it upon myself as my mission to become a little more literate in understanding water problems. And I think we all can do that on an individual level. And then I think we can all learn to network. You've started a good way to network today, and for the last number of days with all the people in this room. We know water is a sacred gift from our Creator. It is our responsibility as peoples to protect it and take care of it. And I think that we can do that by networking and not diminishing the problem, and knowing that we have people at the national and international levels already doing the good work that needs to be done. And so that makes me feel good. And so it was really important for me to come here and tell you about our situation. And it will be an ongoing struggle and challenge, but that's the way it is. And I accept that. And I don't expect it to be different than that. I don't expect that we're going to get a handout. I expect that we have to show that the money is being used to make a difference in our water systems. And it is our right. It is our right as people to have safe drinking water. And it's an Aboriginal treaty right also. So I think my message to you would be the key to effective action is community power, and not just your local community power, but your community of neighbors, other First Nations communities, and also those foundations who work at the national and international levels. Now go. Thank you.